Hello to you, my birds, lizards, and humans, who I hope are not only watching, but also finding ways to support the channel. You can check the description or wait until the end of the video for how. But for now, let's get on with the episode. I think it's not an exaggeration to say that almost every writer I've ever met, talked to, interacted with, or observed, has wanted to write a novel or has written them. In fact, I get the impression most people consider it to be the payoff for one's efforts as a writer. That putting together a novel or a series is just something every writer wants to do. And, I admit, for a long time, that was the case with me too. But at some point, I realized something. The better I was getting, the shorter my work became. And then I started reading more short stories, and found myself enjoying them far more and consuming them far faster than I do novels. And it's not like I was exposed to novels first. The earliest things I can remember reading are the stories of Sherlock Holmes or Conan the Barbarian. I found short stories and novellas even before I first cracked a novel. That first novel I ever read was Bram Stoker's Dracula, by the way. So over time, I did eventually write short stories. I think, in terms of completed works, I have actually written more short stories than novels, but I tend to celebrate my novels more. But I have observed a few key differences in writing one over the other that I feel help make the processes more distinct from each other. And maybe, at the end, I'll figure out which of the two I like better as my format of choice. The obvious difference between the two is length. But that comes with a few particular caveats. While there are some industry standards that speak about how long a given novel in a given genre is supposed to be, things are much less determined and standardized for short stories. The consensus, as far as I can tell, is that a short story must be more than 1,000 words long but not long enough to be a novella. Vague, I know. I like to use the metric that a short story is short if it can be read in one sitting, or in quick bursts. So it might be just long enough to take 15 minutes or might eat up an hour of your time and still be considered short. This difference informs the differences in how they're written. Novels have the room to breathe, to relax, to slouch on the couch and meander a little. Not a lot, but an author has a bit more space to work with when it comes to a novel. For a short story, things have to be much tighter and more focused. You don't have the space to really lounge on any one thing, because the constraints encourage you to get to the damn point. No wasted words, no unnecessary details. This means that subplots can't be fit into a short story. Your focus has to be very tight, like a camera that's very closely following your protagonist. A novel has the room for subplots and a few novellas might be able to fit one or two small ones, but a short story can't. I think what short stories lose in terms of room to breathe and expand, it gains in flexibility. There are some ideas for scenes or stories that simply cannot be expanded into a full novel. Short stories can be just about a single incident, a single moment in someone's life, without any particular context other than what you choose to provide. In some ways, a short story might not even have a plot, but instead study a character as they live through a specific moment in their life, like in The Huntsman by Anton Chekhov. Or you might use a short story to painstakingly paint a picture of one specific moment of relevance to a character's life, contrasting it with the unimportant dullness of the rest of his life, as done masterfully by Leo Tolstoy in The Death of Ivan Ilyich. While the latter is also possible in a novel, I don't think the length lends itself to that too much. As for the former, I think it's only possible in a short story, unless your novel consists entirely of that one moment told from a different perspective, in the style of Rashomon. Pacing doesn't have to be relentless in a short story. The style you're going for matters more than the length of what you're working on, I believe. If you want something to be fast-paced, to feel like it's moving quick, you want to keep sentences short and choppy, whether you're writing a novel or a short story. If you want to linger on a detail, draw attention to something specific, you let the sentences go longer and more languid. This holds true for a short story as much as it does for a novel. These are all things I imagine most authors already know or learned as they went along. Where, You might wonder, are what I've come to realize about writing the two. In my case, I think short stories are easier to write. The format is more forgiving of slice of life and snapshot-style narratives than novels are. And sometimes you don't need to have a plot to have a good short story, merely the momentum needed to keep the reader moving forward. A number of Chekhov's short stories don't have anything resembling a plot but instead use prose to present us a picture of the moment he's chosen to take a picture of and show us. Short stories might have a sequence of events, but a sequence of events doesn't necessarily mean there's a plot. Short stories are also less forgiving of wasted words and space, I feel. There just isn't room for you to meander and linger on every irrelevant thing like you were getting paid by the word. A short story must be a writer at their most efficient, I think, evoking all the necessary images and emotions with as little space used as possible. It is a challenge that I often relish, which might be due to the things I've had to write outside the space of fiction and this YouTube channel. Novels are better if you want to explore multiple perspectives on a theme or storyline. You aren't as constrained as a short story and you're in a better position to explore and go into greater depth on the various perspectives your characters have concerning the themes of your work. You're also able to go taller, in the sense of having bigger stakes to the conflict, or wider, in that novels allow more room to plant subplots and other pieces involved in your narrative conflict. The laser focus of a short story doesn't lend itself well to this strategy. I like to write novels, but I've developed a tendency to write shorter works the better I get. Tossing out unnecessary details or saying things with greater clarity but less words. And that lends itself more to short stories and novellas than novels, and that's all right with me. It probably helps that I have a lot of ideas that work better in shorter formats than full-length novels. A part of me just wants to dive in and embrace the format as my primary writing form. Short stories, I think, also lend themselves towards the chaotic no-plans approach I have to writing as well. You don't necessarily have to think ahead so much as just see where the plot seed or idea takes you, and the shorter length means a lower risk of getting stuck because you've written yourself into a position that your writing and creative skills can't get you out of yet. This isn't to say all chaos-loving authors like me should only write short stories, but I am saying that it might be a good thing to dip into between longer projects. With all of that in mind, what are my final thoughts? Well, I think I'm still going to write a novel from time to time. The existence of my NaNoWriMo project tells me that I haven't tapped the well dry of things I can write that will meet the industry minimum length of 50,000 words. However, I think as my writing style continues to develop, I am better suited to writing short stories. Also, they're easier to produce in a short amount of time, such that I think I can pull off the late Ray Bradbury's suggestion of writing a short story a week for an entire year. And I'd be lying if I didn't admit I rather enjoy the sense of accomplishment I feel at completing multiple short stories, rather than one long novel. I think the sustained hit of dopamine, even in smaller doses, is going to do wonders for my mood in the long term. With that, I believe I've said what I have to say about novels, short stories, and the writing thereof. Now, if you are still here and are interested in supporting the channel, you can do the usual liking and subscribing, as well as sharing the video with your friends. You can also click the description, where you will find a link to my Patreon page if you want to support more directly. Or buy copies of my books, which are all relatively short fantasy novels that try to focus on the people rather than the fantastical. You might enjoy them or know someone who does. And as always, do mind the lizard.